I've prepared a simple scene with some UI panels and some buttons and also an empty game object called UI page controller. I'm going to attach the page controller script to that one and also attach the UI page script to all the panels. UI page has two public methods. One enables its game object and another disables it. These methods are being called from UI page controller, and the UI page controller has a stack of UI page called page history. This is similar to a list, so you could also use a list instead of stack, but unlike a list, you can only access and remove the last element of your collection. So if you do use the list, you should make sure to always only remove or access the last element. I'm going to show you the equivalent method calls for a list. It has two public methods. The add page method takes in UI page as its parameter and it pushes that page into the page history stack by using the push method. This is similar to lists add method. Once that is done, I'm going to call the open method from that page, which simply enables its game object. In the remove page, we are not passing any arguments, but we are going to call pagehistory.pop, which is going to remove the last element from the stack, and we are going to assign that to current page variable, and we are going to call the close method from that removed page. This is the equivalent of writing list.remove and passing in the last index of its collection. Back in the scene, I'm going to add an event to all the buttons and assign the UI page controller to it. And for the first 4 buttons, I'm going to call UI page controller add page, and for the close button, I'm going to call UI page controller remove page, and for the home button, I'm going to drag and drop the home page as its parameter. For the in-game button, I'm going to do the same with the in-game panel. Pause button gets the pause UI page, and settings button gets the setting UI page as its parameter. So let's disable all these UI pages and press play. Great, this is working as intended, but if I press the close button one more time, I'm going to get an error. That is because our stack is empty, but I'm still trying to remove it. To prevent that, I'm going to add this if block that checks if the page history.count is less than or equal to 0 and exits the method using the return key. Let's add a method to close all the pages at once. In this method, we are going to use the while loop to check if the page history.count is greater than 0, and we are going to remove that page and call its close method. We can also write this in a single line like this. Next, I'm going to create another method called remove all and add page, which takes in a UI page as parameter. This is just a combination of remove all pages and then add page. Let's assign those methods to respective buttons. And for this example, I'm going to pass in-game page as the one that we are going to open. Alright, this is working. Next, I need an option to be able to hide the previous page. Let's open some pages. Right now, the previous page is pause UI. So if I click on the close, that is going to go away, right? If I open the settings page next, I want to be able to control whether the pause UI gets hidden or not. Not removed from the stack, but just hidden. So I can add a boolean to our page UI that informs us that we can do that. Go to page UI and add a public boolean called disable when next page opens, and this should be fine, but I don't like to have any public APIs exposed in the inspector. So what I like to do is I'm going to create a private boolean called disable when next page opens, and from this public boolean I'm simply going to return that private field. This is just my way of doing things, but like I said, you could simply end up with a public boolean and that should be fine. Back in the UI page controller, before we push the new page to the stack and before we open it, let's get the previous page by using page history.peek and check if its disable when next page opens is true and call its close function. Remember, we are not removing it, we are simply disabling it. And that is what this is doing here, right? If we were to remove it, we'd have to use the page history.pop. So this is still in the stack, just disabled. And the peek returns the last element of our stack without removing it. This is similar to calling a list and passing the last element's index. If the page history currently has 0 elements in it, this might give us an error. So let's encase this whole thing in a if block that is going to check if our page history count is greater than 0, and only then we are going to perform these instructions. And I'm going to set the disable when next page is open boolean for the pause page. So after reaching the pause page, if I push any other pages, that is going to get disabled, but it is still in the stack. So if I close this button again, nothing happens because we need to do the opposite when we close. In the remove page method, after we remove the current page from the stack and close it, let me simply copy this if block and paste it here. And instead of closing, we are simply going to open it. So now if I try to close this settings UI, the pause UI gets re-enabled. And that's great. One more thing is when we try to add a page, let's check if the argument is null and exit out of this method. This is still going to give us an error when we try to call this with a Unity event like this, but that won't be the case when we try to access this method from a script. Now we have one more issue. To have a better look at this, I'm going to attach this script to Unity. If you're not familiar with how to debug in Unity, this is how you can do that. By clicking on this, the first time you do this, you may get a pop-up in the Unity to enable the debugging. So go ahead and click yes. And once you're set up, let's add a breakpoint here and here. So these are the breakpoints. So basically when the Unity runs to this line of code, it is going to pause the game and take us here. So let's hit play and I'm going to open the home page. And as you can see, it brought us to this page and I can move to the next line using this step over. The shortcut is F10 or step into F11. So let's just use step over to go to the next line. And here, now if I hover over this page history, I can see that we have added the home page to the stack. Hit continue. I'm going to open in-game and I'm going to go to the next line here. And if I take a look at this, I see that we added an in-game page as well. And just to make this quicker, I'm going to remove that breakpoint and add the breakpoint here and hit continue. And I'm going to add the in-game page one more time. And this time we can see that we added the in-game page one more time. This should be enough. So hit continue. And now I'm going to close the page and let's have a look at the page history. Right now we have in-game page twice. So as you can guess, if I go to the next line and once we pop from this page, we remove the in-game page and we are going to now call its close method, which is going to deactivate its game object. And this is the good opportunity to show you what happens when I press step into. So step over simply steps over the line but here I'm calling another method. So if I click the step into, it is going to step into that function. So we are in the UI page's close method. So I can click on step into, step over, whatever, and that's how it works. I'm going to click on continue, and we see that the page is gone. I mean, the page is disabled, but it is not really gone, as you saw. So I'm going to hit close one more time, and you can prove that by hovering over here. See, the in-game page was still there. So this time when I continue, the in-game page should be gone completely. So one more time, if I press close, we see that we only have a home page remaining, and this time we are finally going to close the home page. I'm going to exit out of the debug mode by clicking on this red icon and remove these breakpoints. When we try to add a new page, we are going to check if it's the same as the previous one, not if the page stack contains that page at all, because we may have to call the page more than twice, and the same page could be in different menus. So instead of that, we are simply going to check if the immediate page is the same as this one. We are going to return. Let's create a if block, and this is going to check if page history dot peak, because we are not removing it, we are only having a look, is equal to the page, the new page. We are going to exit out of this function, but this may give us an error if the page history has no page at all. So we need to also make sure before we call that page history dot count is greater than 0, and if the current page is the same as the new page, then we are going to exit out of this method. And this time let me open in-game page like a lot of times, and when I close, it's gone immediately because it did not add it again and again. And that should be it for the UI system. In the next one, I'm going to show you how we can add sound effects and motions to our UI pages. If this is something you're looking for, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification. Alright then, see ya.